I have never felt as brown as I did the time that I got off a plane coming out of Los Angeles, California into Denver, Colorado. The cold winter air seeped straight through my flimsy hoodie and through my flesh into the pit of my stomach, pouring down, forming a icy ball of anxiety. I was 17 years old, I was out of my element, and I did not want to be there. And it doesn't matter how many times people say the joke, there is no fun in funeral. Just a few days prior, my dad had found out that my uncle, his brother, had passed away. And so 2 days later, we were on a bereavement flight to Colorado, and there we stood in the Denver airport. My brown father, my brown sister, and my brown stepmom. In the white utopia of Denver, with even this ground outside was white with snow. The thing to keep in mind about me, though, is that I actually was raised by a single white mother. I am biracial. And we actually were an English-speaking household in the middle of a Mexican community that spoke primarily Spanish. And most of the friends that I had were actually either white or otherwise didn't participate in that community, so I didn't really identify with those individuals. And even though I didn't really spend a lot of time with my dad or that side of the family a whole lot, I did spend a lot of time with my grandparents, my Mexican grandparents, but they chose to not teach us any Spanish so as to Americanize us. And in that, they succeeded with me. So I had formed my own little bubble of self-identity that did not include race, or so I felt. So in Denver, when I showed up at the house, I was inundated with family on all sides. There were my uncles and aunts and cousins and all these people that I hadn't spoken to or even really thought of for God knows how long. And there they were, face to face, right there with me. And the resemblance was uncanny. In fact, if you looked at me compared to my male cousins, we could have been brothers, twins in one case. And yet the more I talked to them, the less I felt I understood them. It didn't really feel like we were from the same tribe. At one point, there was actually the conversation of, do you have a girlfriend? And I didn't really have it in me to tell them that I actually had started the coming out process a year prior, so I just kind of sidestepped the conversation and we just went about our way. You know, we continued to not understand each other from that point forward. Dramatic pause. So like I said, the more that I spoke to them, the less I understood them. And the thing is, it didn't matter what we said. There was just this divide, and there was a thing that I didn't understand about them, especially when it came to like the relationship between the man and the woman. I grew up in a very woman-strong household, and I was very much a feminist, and I was a young punk, and I was like hardcore feminist, and everything about me just screamed that this was weird, that the women were doing all the work and all the men were having all the fun. And while we were there for a funeral, people were treating it more like a family reunion, and nobody was really doing anything except for the woman. And at one point, there was a conversation between all the village elders, as it was, where the men were just getting in the way, and we needed to go down to the movie theater and just watch something get out of the house. And I just felt wrong about this. Felt weird. And on top of that, the movie that they all decided they wanted to watch was a war movie, which is name I forget. And again, I'm a young punk, and I just wasn't into that. And on top of that, an important thing to keep in mind is that this was shortly after September 11th. This was February of 2002, so I was super not into that. I don't even remember actually walking to the movie theater. I don't remember actually going to the movie. I remember walking to the movie theater, and I remember walking back, and just not talking to anybody because I was over this completely. And I started asking myself, why am I even here? What do I have to get out of this? What do they have to give to me? I don't understand these people, and I don't really want to. Then the next day, we all braved the snowstorm that was brewing around us and went to the church for the viewing of my uncle. And the parking lot itself, which I was sliding across because I had just no traction on my shoes, was just full to brimming with just so many cars, and there was more people in the parking lot than they were coming through the house, and I was a little surprised because even though we were a pretty large contingency of people, this was more than us. And I went inside, And the family was actually not able to sit down at first because there were so many people there for my uncle. White people, black people, Asian, Mexican, it didn't matter. His family was beyond the family that I thought that he had had. He was a park ranger. He mattered to the community. And I didn't even get that about him. I didn't take the time to get to know him. I was so self-involved in this entire process that it was hilarious even. And it was at that time that I actually started to understand why I was there was not for me, it was for them. You have your chosen family, and you have your family that you're born into, and sometimes, even if it doesn't make sense, the one that you're born into must become your chosen family as well. There was a moment that really solidified this for me, where my grandmother went to go to the casket to view my uncle for one last time. And she's a very strong, powerful woman. She's taken care of nothing but men her entire life. Her father and mother died when she was young, and she only had brothers that were all younger than her. She only had sons. She only dealt with men. The complete opposite of me, really. And she couldn't do it. She just walked up to the casket and she just looked to it, not in it, said, "I'm not doing this," and she walked away. Like I mentioned, I actually grew up with my grandparents, so this was a very strong moment for me, and I chose to go with my father and not look at my uncle and be with my grandmother instead. Because like I said, sometimes you have to make a decision and choose your family, regardless of what your connection was before. So that's not where the story ends though. An interesting thing happened when I actually pitched this to this show. So all this time I had gone through and I thought I had self-discovered something very interesting about myself, where I was like, oh, I understood part of my culture a little bit through discovering myself at this time. What actually happened, I started talking to my other family members that went with me, and at first I talked to my sister, and I started saying, I pitched a story about how I didn't understand my family because they were a little bit too Mexican for my liking, and I didn't really understand that. And my sister said, "Don't you know that our aunt is white? Don't you know that your cousins are also biracial and they don't speak Spanish either?" And I said, "No, this is news to me." And then my stepmom, I asked her about this, and she said, well, she grew up in a Mexican household, and the things that she was expecting to see, she didn't see. So this was surprising her as well, that I felt that it was very overtly Hispanic. Then I asked my dad about this, and he asked me the question, are you really sure that you're seeing this for being overly Mexican in your opinion? Or are you just not used to being around men? And it was in that moment that I realized that when I actually thought back to this, I didn't see anything that was overtly Mexican about anything they did. It was just a family I didn't understand, a community that I didn't understand, because they were very macho. So, in the end, what I discovered about myself is that I am full of biases, in particular because of the way that I grew up, being part of one culture and part of another culture, and not taking the time to actually connect them together to form myself. I made up my own rules that nobody else followed and nobody else could attest to. So, in the end, all I have is to work on myself and learn from this experience that I've done today. Thank you.